Hey friends, welcome. When I read the gospel accounts of the events following the resurrection of Jesus, it seems there was a lot of confusion. I come to that conclusion in part because there are inconsistencies between the accounts. In Mark, the original ending has Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of Jesus, and Salome finding the empty tomb and leaving the scene in fear. In Matthew, the Marys encounter Jesus near the tomb, then rush to tell his disciples. Later, Jesus commissions the disciples. In Luke, the Marys speak to two angels at the tomb, then rush to tell the others. Jesus appears to two followers on the road to Emmaus, then to his disciples. Luke concludes with the ascension of Jesus to heaven. Chapter 20 of John's Gospel reports some encounters at the tomb, then Jesus appearing to his disciples. It ends by saying, "Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples that are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may continue to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that through believing you may have life in his name." If you think that sounds like a good stopping point, you'd be in agreement with many Bible scholars who think that's how John originally ended. But there's also a chapter 21 to John, and there are no manuscripts of that gospel that don't include it. It's almost like the author was reviewing the original draft at some point and then thought, what about the 153 fish when Jesus made us breakfast on the shore of Lake Tiberias? I can't leave that out. Thus, we have today's passages, what Bible scholars refer to as a postscript or epilogue to the gospel. Peter decides to go fishing, and the disciples who were with him decided to go along. Unlike the other Gospels, which mention Peter's vocation earlier, John's Gospel never indicates that any of Jesus' disciples were fishermen before he called them. This is the only such mention in John. They fished all night without making a catch. The next morning, as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore and told them to cast their net on the right side of the boat, and as in the miracle catch reported in Luke 5, it quickly became overloaded. This caused one of the disciples to recognize the man on the shore as Jesus, which is another echo of Luke 5. That miracle was the occasion of Simon Peter's initial call to become a disciple of Jesus. Peter swims to shore, and the other disciples reach it by boat, and they find Jesus has prepared a charcoal fire and a meal of bread and fish for them. Nobody asked him who he was. The gospel simply states they knew it was the Lord. Then they ate together. Why were the disciples fishing after the world-altering resurrection of Jesus? We can only speculate. Why the specific number of 153 fish? There's no consensus, but scholars suspect it somehow represents totality. Something that is more apparent is that this miraculous catch brings us full circle, reminding us of Jesus' first miracle in John, which was turning water into wine. As Bible scholar Gail O'Day writes, Jesus' first and last revelatory acts in the gospel narrative are thus both miracles of abundance in Galilee. When I'm invited to a lengthy meeting scheduled at noon or evening events that span 6 to 8 p.m., I'll admit that the first thing that comes to my mind is often, but when will we eat? It seems our schedules are so packed with appointments that we end up sacrificing meal times, sleep, time with family or friends, and even time for ourselves. Thus, I appreciate this ending to John, where Jesus recognizes the need his disciples have for nourishment, especially after a long night of fishing. The ministry of Jesus began small but reached a large scale. The journey of the disciples with Jesus has taken them from their remote home region in Palestine to the capital city of Jerusalem. Those who learned of Jesus' teachings eventually included the highest religious and political authorities, and the threat he posed was deemed so significant he was executed by the Romans. But along the way, Jesus demonstrated that fulfilling his mission required tending to the basic and essential components of being human. He took time to eat, pray, and spend time with friends. I think he expects the same of us, regardless of our calling. The same can't be said of the corporate world, at least not in my experience. During my career in cybersecurity, putting in excessive work hours was often seen as a badge of honor. Many of my colleagues traveled extensively, which had an impact on their family life. On one occasion, my boss woke his toddler at 5 a.m. the morning of a business trip so he could celebrate her birthday with her before his flight. It was a major shift for me to transition to a non-corporate career where metrics and monetization are not the focus of our work. One significant difference in this space is that our meetings often begin with a check-in. Check-ins offer an opportunity for each individual present to share how they are doing before delving into the objectives on the agenda. Knowing where people are coming from helps us meet one another where we're at and to accommodate accordingly. Last week, I was at a gathering of faith leaders, and many of the check-ins around the table were similar to mine. Everyone there is concerned about the livability of the planet, and thus is troubled by the administration's efforts to expand fossil fuel production while eliminating the regulations that keep us safe. Everyone there is concerned about the threats to the marginalized, including the unhoused in Harrisburg. Everyone there is concerned about the financial challenges that are being faced by our neighbors and the ability of our faith communities to compensate for the withdrawal of federal support for those in need. At the same time, our check-ins also included gratitude. It was a beautiful day, and we were thankful for the new life we witnessed springing from the earth. We were grateful that we were safe and healthy. We were grateful for the opportunity to gather together. For us, one of the essential components of being human is taking a break from bad news to spend time in gratitude. When I begin to summon a list of all the things for which I'm grateful, my net can quickly become full. Sometimes abundance is realized explicitly and suddenly, like the miraculous catch in Lake Tiberias, and sometimes it's realized by simply recognizing what is already around us. Jesus didn't show up that day just to make breakfast for his friends. He also had some important words for Peter. Whereas in Matthew and Acts, the disciples are called to follow Jesus collectively, in John's Gospel, the focus is on the one Jesus referred to as the rock. He has a specific call for Peter. He asks him to feed his lambs, to tend his sheep, to feed his sheep, and to follow him. Jesus wished for Peter to be a leader among the disciples. And he also offers a warning, saying, "Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and to go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go." The author of John, who likely completed this account after Peter's execution by the state, writes, "He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God." Sadly, most of the 12 original disciples would be executed by the Romans in various cruel ways. The author of John was an exception. While following his call did lead to his being exiled, his life was reportedly spared by the Romans. This leads O'Day to write that Jesus repeatedly calls his disciples to a life of love shaped by his own gift of his life is incontestable. Yet not all discipleship will be marked by the disciples laying down his or her life. The apostles probably had no idea where the call to follow Jesus would eventually lead. Perhaps at first all they knew was that his message and way of life ran counter to what they had experienced living in the shadow of the Roman Empire. His words resonated with them, and they left behind what was familiar to learn more, and even though they didn't know what was to come. That uncertainty is reflected in John's Gospel. O'Day writes that concerns about the faith community's future are an integral part of his understanding of who Jesus is. How will the community live in his absence? What shape will their lives take? How will they endure persecution and the world's hatred? How will they experience Jesus' presence? What will be their identity as a people of faith? Maybe one of the reasons the unique language of John's Gospel continues to resonate with followers of Jesus is that we're still asking those questions. How will our faith shape our lives? How will we stay true to our call in a society controlled by wealth and power, which champions a very different value system? We don't know what led Peter and the others to fish that night. Maybe they wanted to go back to doing something they knew. Maybe being out on the water helped them process all they'd witnessed. Maybe they were hungry. Regardless of their motivation, what happened was that in the midst of everyday life, Jesus surprisingly appeared to interrupt their routines and commission them to fulfill their unique callings. Our callings are certainly unique, reflecting the diversity that our Creator seems to value and enjoy so much. I continue to be amazed at how the callings of people manifest themselves in different ways, whether through work, volunteering, interactions with others, and financial generosity. At different critical times in my life, I've had people help me in different ways, and the manner in which that help has come has varied based on my need. It's come in the form of advice that helped me avoid a bad decision, physical therapy that fixed an ailing shoulder, help repairing something I couldn't have afforded to replace, medicine from a doctor that brought desperately needed relief, financial help when I was behind on bills. These are just a few examples of how people responding to their call helped me when I was in need. They came from different walks of life, but all saved me from a difficult situation. Another thing about calls is that they often change as we move through the seasons of our lives. As a young adult, I answered a call to work in schools, which provided opportunities to directly impact the lives of students. Later, I was drawn to a career in cybersecurity. That offered few opportunities to work with people in need, but it paid well, and thus we were able to support more charities and other nonprofits. Then came a call to ministry, and I find myself navigating another chapter of my life. I suspect you might have had similar experiences in your life, responding to different nudges and discerning what path to take. We have different calls because it takes different skills and talents and education and experience to continue the work of Jesus and respond to the world's needs. And when we come together to contribute to the greater good, our responses to our calls also help us move toward God's kingdom. I was reminded of such movement by one of the readings we shared at last week's Peace Outdoors gathering. Candace Woods writes that as we consider and become awake to the realities of the world as it is, it's important that we also hold with us a vision and a dream of the world as it could be. Recently, there has been much said in churches and Facebook posts and devotionals about the violence of the state, the realities of oppression, the truth of climate change. And we need to feel that fully and see it in its entirety. And we must let our imaginations run wild with the dreams of what might possibly be. A world where the land is restored, where crops grow and ecosystems are in balance and humans have stopped our rampant devastation. A world where there's abolition, where prisons aren't remembered and justice is about care and we don't police one another. We must hold these things together and dream a wild dream of life and restoration and hope and care and kindness and joy and peace. My friends, the promise of abundance didn't end with Peter's catch of 153 fish. When we follow our call, it can result in getting more than we imagined possible. I pray for such abundance for you and for those whose lives you touch. May it be so. Amen. Hey, thank you for joining me today. While you're here, if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. And also consider supporting Intertwined, whether it's messages like this that appeal to you or other aspects of our ministry or our work for social justice or the involvement in service in the area. We could always use your help. So if you scan the QR code on your screen or visit that URL, you can find ways to do that and learn more about what we do and other ways to get involved. Thank you.